Oh, sorry, Andrew, go on.
Cool. Andrew, Maps team, super curious about the user experience. Overlaps both on the map side, but also on this, as we move more and more into dashboard territory and collaborating with other teams, and how to do that well with INI or with ops teams or with international teams, and just like good standards. So really curious about that.
Yeah. Paul, I'm just going in order of my screen.
Hi, Paul here, in the GIS team. Introduce myself. I've mainly been seconded out for the past 5 months to the VCSEP, but will be rolling back into the GIS team in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Jacqueline?
Hi, so Jackie. I work in the BI Business Intelligence team. I am an analyst. Work with dashboards. Currently working a little bit with postcode. Yeah, most of the time in doing some corporate reports.
Thanks. Izzy?
Yeah, I'm also in the Maps team, sort of a data analyst, biz person.
Yeah. Laura?
Hi, so I'm in Jacqueline's team as well, the BI team for UK Ops, sitting in INI. And my name's Laura, I realised I didn't actually say that to begin with. And my role is analytical support manager, so I help build dashboards as well, but also do quite a bit of work on that requirements gathering and defining indicators so that we know what we're actually trying to report against consistently.
That's great, thanks. Claire?
Hey, I'm Claire and I work in the central data team. So that's a team that does like all the modelling of the data around the organisation. And we're responsible for the enterprise architecture repository there. But I work most closely with UK Ops data. So it's me.
Thanks. And David?
Hi everyone, I'm David. I work in international, but with the overseas branches that are mostly based in the Caribbean. Yeah. And working on developing some reporting for them using SharePoint, using Power BI, but it's all quite new to me and very new to them, so just sort of listening in. Nice to see everyone.
Sounds good, thank you. I just want to say, just because we're a small group today, feel free to interrupt and make the session yours. So like ask questions and contribute as well, like I'm sure a lot of the things I say, I'll be missing details or it might not be completely correct. So like just jump in and add and contribute so that it's not just me talking as well for ages. And hopefully we can have a discussion at the end as well. Okay, I'm gonna start the presentation and hopefully just interrupt me with questions and stuff. Let's go. If I can find the present button. There we go. So I just wanted to have a session on human-centered design for information management, just because it tends to be something we forget when we do information management, and it's quite easy for it to fall off the priority list when I don't think it should. So I'm just going to start from basic design principles, and then I'll move on to link it back to information management as we go, hopefully. So this is a diagram from IDEO. I don't know if anyone's heard about IDEO, but it's one of the biggest, well, not biggest, but the most famous design agency in the sector, or even outside of the sector, but they've designed a lot of like charities from scratch and organizations and not just products. And this is a diagram that you'll find across a lot of design kind of principles. And it's the sweet spot for kind of building a product. And it's quite interesting because a lot for the relevance to information management is that we tend to we're a quite tech heavy role, let's be honest. And we tend to jump quite quickly into the feasibility kind of lens really quickly. So like someone comes with a request or a question and we're just immediately like being what product comes out of it. And we forget quite quickly. I mean, not everyone does, but it's very easy when you're in a rush and you have a high workload to forget the other things that make a product successful. And I've also seen like people in the field quite stressed, understandably, forgetting the main part of it, which was the original people making the requests. And you just start building something and it doesn't really fit the requirements. And people tend to, they'll be like, oh yeah, it's not bad. And it just becomes a product that becomes unused eventually. So typical things will be like someone approaches you and then you can be immediately, you're like, oh, I think maybe we'll make a dashboard, or I don't think we can make a map with this. Like we go immediately into the technology side of it, which we're jumping a few steps ahead. Ideally in a design process, this is like, I'm talking about like in an ideal world, you have all the time in the world and you can sit down and think about things, obviously. And the reality is not always like that. But in an ideal world, you start with the user needs. So you make sure that you question all your assumptions. What are the needs behind this request? What are they trying to achieve and to what end? And what does success look for them? So sometimes it's the end is not clear, or the request itself is not clear, or it's not well articulated, just because maybe the user sometimes hasn't had time either to sit down and reflect on that. So it can be your role sometimes to also sit down and guide them through what their needs actually are. Sometimes people can come to you and be like, I need a map immediately, but there's no data, you're not even sure a map is what they actually need. Maybe they just need data and things like that. So just this is really important to ensure that we don't put technology ahead of like what we're trying to do it for at the end of the day. And the third point, obviously, is the viability of it, which when we do start building it and we have thought about the people and the technology, then we also need to think about the viability of it. So is it scalable? Do we need to scale it? Who will own this in the long term? Who will be maintaining it? How long do we need to maintain it for? How do we get more feedback if things changes and things like that, like all these questions that come with viability of a product. Do stop me if I talk too much. So I'm just going to go into more kind of like tools and how we can do this. And these are like standard things that are used in the industry in general. So this is like 3 steps of the design process. It's a shame we don't have any people from innovation or from the UX team online, but I'm sure we can get a hold of them one day. So this design process has different names. Like people will call it slightly differently, but it's basically the same 3 steps, just with different words. And the first one, and the idea of it, is to try to understand the problem, to understand the users and what they really need. The second one is to start thinking about your product, but to keep your mind open in terms of like the possibilities, just so that you don't get bogged down by a specific tool or a specific process that you have in place and you just automatically go to it, when maybe the best process is something that you haven't created yet or doesn't exist, or it could be something that you haven't thought about. So that's just to keep your mind open when thinking about the concept of the product. And then the final step is to implement. So this diagram just calls it slightly differently. So if I go back, it's inspiration, ideation, and implementation. Here they call it understand, explore, and materialize, which is the same thing, the same 3 steps, but they detail them a little bit more. So, you know, you do some user research, you define the problem, and then you ideate a bunch of solutions. Then you actually prototype the solution. You test it, obviously, and then you start building it. But then this is a circle, so you have to keep going back to the users and redefining new needs and things like that. And every time you capture new needs, then you should go back and test it again and things like that. So that's the ideal process. This is a diagram of like a way of thinking. It's the same process, but the idea is that when you're in the understanding phase, you should have an open mindset, right? Like you keep your mind as open as you can. So the amount of ideas in your head should be divergent. So like you really try to see it from different perspectives. And when you start thinking about the product, then you start narrowing it down, but then you start diverging again before you build. So like, you know, when you open it to testing and things like that, then the idea is that it's not a linear process. It's more like every time you run through the circle, you try to open your mind to other possibilities at every stage, and then you refine the product. You don't just jump directly into it. So obviously this is in an ideal situation, and understandably not everyone has the time to do it, and nor realistically do we all have time to do it, but you can really simplify the process anyway. Like you can do it on a micro level, right? Like in a conversation, you just make sure that when you do have the conversation with the user, you keep your mind open. It doesn't have to be like a 5 months, you know, discovery phase and things like that, but if you're building a small product, you just need to scale that same process down, but to a smaller scale, obviously. So I'm just going to go through a bunch of tools, but for each of these steps. So there are three steps.
I have a quick comment question.
Go for it.
Very cool. As you were explaining it, I was thinking of multiple of our things that had failed in various stages of that, and how valuable it is to take, when you start a conversation with someone and they're very excited about the thing, to make sure that they understand the other different phases as well. And there will be testing, and there will be handover, and there will be sustainability. It's almost like, you know, people want something useful, great. But making sure that they understand that that something useful needs to be maintained, especially when they're not like a normal customer, when it's like somebody you haven't dealt with before, which is often in our operations. But I'm guessing we all have our own version of that story, but it would be quite interesting to hear that, like from the INI and from David Peters' side and stuff, maybe at the end. But I'm just echoing what you've said and how important having those different perspectives up front with the user is. So
yeah, that's good. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll have time for a discussion as well, and then we can talk about like how we can show. I was thinking to show like a few products that we have lying around on I4C Go, and people can share the things they've worked on and things like that as well, because otherwise if I just keep presenting, it will be really boring. Yeah, so I'm just gonna quickly talk through some tools that exist to walk through each of the steps, and yeah, hopefully we can talk about like how it is concretely as well. So in the understanding phase, these are some of the tools that you can use to understand the user needs. There's affinity diagrams, user journeys, pain points, user stories, jobs to be done. There's a lot of them. You can Google them, or we can talk about them in a discussion if anyone's interested specifically in any of them. But there's a lot of them basically, and the idea is that they help you understand different aspects of the needs, and they capture slightly different things as well. And it depends on what product you're trying to build and things like that, and what's more appropriate. Some of them take longer than others, obviously, and they evidence different things. So it's more about having a panel of things that you can pick out of when useful and use it at the right time. Obviously, a conversation works as well if you conduct it in the right way, like interviews and things like that, surveys. You just need to know the weaknesses of each of these methods. For exploring ideation, there's many methods of ideation, and we can talk about them as well a bit later. I think I'm going to spend a little bit more time basically on the last phase, which is the implementation phase, because I think the two steps that these two steps we tend to skip them in information management, or we do them but not very well because of a lack of time, which is understandable. and we tend to jump immediately into implementation, which is already like we've skipped a lot of things. But then even the implementation, although we focus on it, we tend to not do it properly as well. I've got some really bad products to show from myself as well. So some of the tools for implementation, for wireframes, prototypes, visual design tools, analytics, other feedback tools as well. And I just want to go a little bit more into the visual design, because this one is something that a lot of people don't find important in information management. They find the technology more important, which I think a lot of us have a technology background, and we tend to be quite good at knowing what technology to use, but then we do tend to forget the visual design side of it, and we end up with very complicated things. So as a general rule, less is more. We should try to use visual hierarchy, alignments, and brand design where possible, obviously, and where they exist. And there's a reason for why they exist generally. It's so that, you know, there's homogeneity and people recognize things where they should. If the red cross was on red, people would not really recognize it. This is a standard presentation that the Federation gives quite regularly about visual hierarchy, that, you know, we should use heading hierarchy, size hierarchy, contrast hierarchy, and positional hierarchy, and things like that. And then also very important, and we really tend to forget this in information management, is to ensure that our design is inclusive and accessible. So colors, font sizes, spacing, I've seen like things, tiny things, which I'm not visually impaired, but I struggle to read them myself. Not just in terms of size, but in terms of semantics, wordings, acronyms, things like that. We don't really think about the users in terms of, for example, dashboards. We assume that everyone who's going to view a dashboard will know all the acronyms and things like that, which is not necessarily true, because when you create an online tool, you don't really know where it's going to end up. And also, when we do create online tools, we tend to forget that it's a web page at the end of the day. Like, it's a web accessible thing, and it should meet web accessibility rules, which there are defined rules that exist, and we might as well learn about them and try to implement them. So these are some of the thoughts I have. I've got some resources, but it would be nice to have a discussion about it as well. I think just to start opening a discussion, I've got maybe I'm just going to jump on I4C Go, and I just wanted to hear what people think about I4C Go, and if people had any thoughts about how it could be improved in terms of visual design, and then we can talk about like the design process as well, Andrew, if you want. Or if anyone has any examples of products they want to discuss. Maybe I'm going to pick on people if no one pitches up.
So what is this product? What's the, I've never seen it before.
So this is the main page for I4C Go. So it's the I4C Go is the information management platform for the Federation. Yeah. And the idea is that, I mean, it's an amazing product, let's be honest. The fact that it exists is absolutely amazing, because before that there was nothing. And the idea is to show real-time data about all of our operations and preparedness work around the world in the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. Sorry, ICRC is not included, but it's all the national societies in I4C. And it allows you to see like all the operations that are ongoing, who's involved in the operation, the numbers for each operation, the analysis, the needs, the funding, the coverage, which national society, the timescales. So this map on the front, so when you go on the website, on the front page, you've got the top highlighted operations. So at the moment, we've got COVID-19 with 450 million Swiss francs requirements, Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas, and the Ebola disease, which are the top operations in the Federation at the moment.
I'm just thinking if you pulled out British Red Cross from there or looked at the 3W, that would be an interesting example. It's kind of relevant to our overlap.
Yeah, we could. I actually don't know how to pull out British Red Cross. Do you know how to?
Go to regions.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Europe. Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah, and then there should be a button somewhere. That's for the whole of Europe. Although the 3Ws for Europe, they haven't actually like filled in stuff. You might go to Asia or Africa if you want 3Ws. Oh no, there are stuff.
Just for people who don't know, the 3W is who is doing what where. It's a standard product that is created in information management. Is we need to show in an operation who is working where, because there tends to be many actors in the same places or in different places, and not knowing who is doing which operation where, so who is doing health here in this community, who is not, and things like that can really make us very inefficient. That's why we make 3Ws. I think someone said something.
How do you get to the 3W page?
I think you just click on the tab.
So that's, yeah, one of the most basic maps that everyone asks for all the time, which is basically like.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what people think about this page. I can send a link out actually. See if like, I can show an example if people want about, this is a typical example that we show all the time. Where is it? It's this one. So this is, how do I can't even, oh, there we go. No, I got this thing in the middle. No, I'm incapable of using PowerPoint. Is it view? No. Oh well, you can see my screen. The point is, this is an infographic that was produced by the UN. Well, it's in French, but the point is that it's really hard to read. It's if you're trying to answer the question, where should we work? It's really hard to answer that question. I mean, I can see there's lots of displaced people and lots of numbers and things like that, but it's not really obvious. Like, so if I received this infographic and I have to decide which region of Mali I have to work in, I'm going to spend a lot of time reading this. And someone has very kindly reorganized exactly the same infographic. This is exactly the same data. And now, like, at a glance, I can see like red things in the middle, in the north of Mali, and my eyes are being drawn really quickly to these two regions, which look like they have more needs than others without even reading the document. And I can find like the proportion of population in there and things like that at a glance really quickly. And to make this decision, it takes me maybe a few minutes, and then I'll read more details and read more about it. But it's exactly the same infographic, and it saves me so much time. And it's the same information, just presented in different ways with different hierarchy, different highlights, different colors, and it really helps. The choice of the color red makes it look more urgent as well. So this is like a typical example. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or any things to share.
I'm wondering if there are any, like you had a positive and a negative examples, if maybe I or David Peters has any sort of things to go to which has been done well or badly.
Yeah, I could. In terms of sustainability of things, the process that you described, I thought we'd gone through that with some overseas branches and developing a monitoring and reporting framework for a specific program. but also everything they do in the branch. And it was very collaborative, and we kind of went and really interrogated everything they do and every piece of data they collect, and then how they wanted to report that into a tool at the end of every month. The issue is that when we're working with such small branches, some of them only have 3 or 4 staff, and they've had a lot of turnover. So despite going through that process, the tool that we're expecting the new staff to fill out is completely foreign, and they don't know how to operate it because they don't know everything behind it. So I think it was, even though the process was collaborative, it hasn't been sustainable because probably what we ended up with was too complex, because it has so many different things coming into it that people aren't familiar with now. So I don't know how we should have gone about it better, or if anyone has suggestions.
Did you have any? Can you show us something? Maybe it might make it slightly more tangible.
Well, the problem is is basically that one thing that puts people off is it's quite an ugly Excel document, which is why we're trying to move away from that and use SharePoint and Power BI.
Yeah. Do you have the Excel document to show? I've seen some really amazing, very clean and usable Excel documents, actually. I think Paul makes a few of them, and they tend to be very good, actually. But yeah, I've also seen some bad Excel documents, some of which I've made, I think.
Well, we thought this was good, but it turned out that no one else seemed to agree.
It could be about the content and not necessarily about the visuals of it.
I'm just opening an example.
Are you looking for an example?
Yeah.
Okay. In the meantime, I can try to look for some examples. If anyone else has any examples, or if they have a product to share that they would like to discuss as well, would be like we can totally just jump into it. Or if anyone has any questions about any of the pieces of the design process.
I can possibly share the tracking spreadsheet from Mozambique.
Yeah, sure. I've never seen it. Oh, you mean the Excel one?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
My lovely Excel.
Yeah.
It's loading.
Paul spent lots of time on this Excel.
Oh, this was my life. No. So in Mozambique, I was deployed for a month in, I suppose, a year ago now, maybe more than a year. Basically to be an information manager with the Federation for the, I'm bringing up, for the Cyclone Idai response. And so, I mean, I think that we have gone through quite a few kind of iterations over the years, essentially like understanding what, and this is peacetime as well, like talking to, say, operations managers, kind of understanding what they need and require, and kind of build out some like user stories of how they would use products such as this, and also with technical advisors. So a couple of like user stories would be like, as an operations manager, they need, or they would like to understand the generic top line trends on what they're doing within 2 days, so that they can then go to government and say, we are doing this, and then get money in. Or as a technical advisor, I need to know the details of daily activities and tracking, so that then I can quickly adapt my response and how I'm working. So one of the tools that we use, admittedly, like this can be made in Power BI and all of that stuff, but often there is no internet, so it's made in Excel. So this is kind of an example. So another thing, they were like, I want this in easily printable, hence why it's now in A4 pages. So the first page essentially combines like high level information, which is viewable by public. So it's made public basically. If I'm deployed, I would then just click file, print, say this is an image, and then I can put it on Go to be publicly consumed by anyone and everyone. But then if I was, say, a technical advisor, I could then like drill down into the data set so that I could change my response possibly depending on the data that's coming through. And you can easily, I mean, it's a dashboard really, that you can click and then it will change. It's Excel and there are thousands of tables, but thousands of rows and many pivot tables, so it's a bit slow. And they can basically screenshot this for their reporting and also interrogate the data further. And then, I mean, that's and then it would basically be for every kind of sector. So like these would be kind of the indicators which would be developed at the very beginning of a response. And then it would be essentially, what are these indicators for the longer term do we want to keep? And then, I mean, it goes through, like, you can filter as much as you want and then everything changes. But, oh God, everything's changing. But yeah, this is an example. Is this what this what you're after?
Yeah, this is good. Thanks. Does anyone have any examples? Pete, have you found yours?
Yeah, I mean, it's nowhere near.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah.
It's nowhere near like, that level, I'm afraid, but it's something. But this is basically just everything they do, and the issue was, I think, which is why Power BI or something similar is so attractive, is that it was seen as a bit of a burden, that a lot of things like related, oh, it's not even going to work now, but a lot of things that were related to income or were sort of recorded in many other places. So this feels like a large duplication. So if there's a system that can pull from their accounting software and other things that they're using into one central place without them having to manually enter lots of different things, it would help them a lot. But it's not a good example because it just was, they just sort of thought it was a bit.
No, but this is a really good example actually, because like, you're trying to think about the users as well. So it's like part of the user experience is not just the visuals at the end, but it's also like how much time they spend inputting the data and how they do it and stuff like that, because that's part of the journey.
Yeah, and we did, there was a whole process, which I think isn't actually on this one, but we mapped out with them, with the teams in the 3 places I work with, like exactly what they wanted to see at the end of it and exactly how the data would get from a training session, for example, into this report.
Yeah.
So as I say, it was done, but then I think it was like that information was largely lost when the people moved on.
So what's your challenge with this product? So is it that they don't find the end product useful, or is it that it's taking too long for them to input the data?
I think both, and even to get the data to feed into it in some cases isn't there.
The data isn't there.
Yeah, that's the other problem as well.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of data that is hard to collect then?
So a really important thing to monitor is volunteers, because then it indicates how prepared a branch is to respond to a hurricane, for example, which is one of the major hazards that they deal with. But if you don't have a really up-to-date and accurate volunteer information in another source, like a database, then obviously you can't feed it into here. So things kind of are integrated, but in the end, what they have is like 10 separate Excel sheets that have to then feed into this final one.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I haven't seen the other Excel sheets, but I imagine if they're inputting data elsewhere, you don't want them to be inputting again here. So yeah, you can connect multiple data sources, multiple Excels into a Power BI, and then you wouldn't have to worry about them inputting data twice. Does that sound like what you're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so.
I would have thought that this is the kind of problem that I stumble into all the time.
I was going to say, very recently, the telephone support line was an example of that, where we only had 2 spreadsheets, but where they were updating all the time using Microsoft Forms, so like an online form where the people who were taking the calls would answer the questions that they were walking through with the person on the phone, and then that automatically gets put into I think it's SharePoint based, that you could then extract and put data in, but they had 2 different versions, so we had to make them the same but then just use Power BI to merge them together, so you could do the same, and it makes it quite easy because once it's set up, the query just does it automatically each time you refresh. So it sounds like that would be a good move. And we have it a lot. People's sort of default reaction to collecting data is, oh, I'll put it in a spreadsheet, rather than thinking if there's something that would be a bit easier. Or always the best scenario is if you can scoop data off the top of something that's already happening, rather than like, oh, I have to collect that as well. Like sort of if it's collected somewhere else and you can use that. And I think sometimes people struggle to sort of think beyond just, oh, I'll just write it down in a spreadsheet again. It's always a problem to try and get away from.
I guess the less times you have to enter it into more places, and it's less of a burden then, isn't it?
Yeah, and you're removing potential user error as well if someone's having to key in a number in 3 places compared to 1, which is always good so long as they get it right the first time. But yeah, and yeah, I've just seen Paul's put in the chat, so Power Query is sort of like what evolved into what supports Power BI. So yeah, even if you wanted to stick with Excel, you could do a similar thing initially.
Yeah, you've got a tab called Power Query. I don't know if, Paul, you want to demo it really quickly, because you know Excel better, I think, than me.
Oh God, oh, I need 2 tables.
Paul has a certification in Excel.
I do. Sorry. No, it's fairly simple actually. I mean, there are lots of like user guides on how to like merge tables and do simple things in Power Query, but I would say like the easiest thing that I've used it for is just like the data cleaning side of things. So you can essentially pull in a external data set and then have some rules which kind of say if basically the spelling is incorrect, you can then kind of fix it, and then it will continue to do that. I mean, that's how I've used it in the past. But you can also merge tables. For the VCSEP work that we were doing early on, we used Power Query to essentially merge 2 tables together that we pulled from SharePoint. However,
is it easy to show?
Oh God, I need to find it. It was like several months ago.
Oh, that's fine. Unless anyone else has any. It's just more visual if people see it.
No, let me see if I can find it. You have to give me a couple of minutes.
Cool. Yeah, unless anyone else has an example as well. But yeah, I think Laura is completely right that yeah, you should minimize if the data is input once somewhere already. You should reuse that data rather than have it aggregated somewhere else manually or something like that.
Yeah, and what we're finding as well, like sort of the differences between, we were kind of talking about earlier today in terms of like, you know, like the 3 little pigs Dom shared. It's like, oh, sometimes you can think of problems in like if it's straw, wood or stone. So we're thinking about our data sources in terms of how robust they were, and the ones that are sort of coming from the database systems that some of the services had compared to where it is like spreadsheet based, and they tend to be the ones that you're dependent on someone else providing it, you're dependent on them doing that on time, you're dependent on it not falling over when it gets pulled into the data model, compared, which can still happen with like SQL Server, but it's more of a, it's easier to troubleshoot those problems sometimes, and it's less erratic behavior compared to Excel spreadsheets if you've got like a lot in the background. So that's the other thing as well, of like always trying to have a more robust tool than Excel if we can, but I know it's not always possible, especially if you haven't got like internet connections and stuff like that, which we don't have to battle with as much in UK Ops, but still sometimes.
Have you tried mapping your data flows, David? Because it kind of helps to.
Well, no, we did do that originally, to be honest. Yes, but as I say, it's just things have stopped in some cases and things have continued in other cases, and it's become such a mess that kind of original mapping is so out of date now, even though it was only a year and a bit ago. But I think it's just generally a bit of an aversion to one program like Excel for a lot of the people I work with. So any alternatives are what they're after as well.
Yeah, I think for data collection, and at least when we're in an operation, we tend to by default use Kobo or forms to input data. Like we rarely, I don't think I've ever asked people to input data via Excel, just because it puts people off. You have to open a computer. It doesn't tend to be user friendly unless you spend lots of time making it user friendly, like putting boxes and drop downs, and even then they break really easily. So if you can try to use a form, the web forms like Microsoft Forms or Google Forms or Kobo, which is free, they have very user-friendly user interfaces, and people can just click and they can put it on their phones. Whereas like Excel, you have to open a computer, and that already scares a lot of people, I think.
I think another point that we've definitely always come across though is that how do you create something that's simple enough for people to change in the future when their indicators or their strategy, for example, that they want to monitor changes without necessarily support available to make all those changes. So it's kind of trying to find a balance between something that does everything they need in a really smart, clever way, or something that's absolutely simple and you can just go in and change and cut it around when you need to. So it's just the balance has always been a problem and challenge as well.
When you say without someone to maintain them, you mean you're not going to maintain it?
Well, no. Like I'm on a program, working on a specific program, and there's not necessarily a direct link, even though these branches are part of the British Red Cross, to someone to support in IT, for example.
Yeah.
Unless we could set that up right now, that would be good.
I think Google Forms is fairly user-friendly, even for people who are not technical. You can create a form really easily, and you can change the questions in the form quite easily. I think Microsoft's form is fairly easy to use as well, if I understand correctly. In terms of, obviously, building the flow is harder, like from Microsoft Form to Power BI. But once the flow is built, hopefully you don't need to change too much of it. And then I believe on the user end, you can change the questions and things like that, and it would work. But it's hard, actually. I think that's one of the challenges, like to maintain data products, you tend to need people, like even maybe not full time, but like someone to look at it once in a while when things change or break. I don't know if anyone has any experience otherwise. I think you guys in I&I have to maintain most of the things you make, right?
Yeah, and we've kind of, so it's interesting, like when building something, we're always trying to future-proof it as well, so it's not necessarily going to fall over if someone's not maintaining it. So for example, and the good thing with Power BI, you can do sort of relative filters rather than saying, oh, okay, it has to equal like 2019 and 2020 so that I can do this year and last year. You can say, no, relative to today's date, show me last year, show me this year. So I don't have to go in at the end of 2020 and update it to 20 and 21. So anything like that will future-proof it. Sorry, I have a poorly toddler today. Anything like that helps future-proofing is good. But there is also, I think, a lot around documentation and describing how things have been built, and having clear, probably more Claire's field, but having clear sort of diagrams and data models about what is underneath the hood kind of thing. So the COVID dashboard is an example that we're producing. We've been trying to make sure that we've got documentation of which measures are used for which indicators, which tables are supporting, like where's the data coming from for each one, so that if suddenly none of us were here, someone could at least read that through. and sort of get an idea of how it's working. But it's tricky trying to do that for something that's maybe not so much now it's dying down, but in the early days of where it's just like we need it released tomorrow, but we also want to try and document it, make sure everything's in place. So again, that's a bit we can spend more time on that now, but that's definitely worth doing. Like, it's always one of those jobs that you tend to put off maybe, but documenting things and like user guides or wiki pages, whatever form it is, just something that gives someone else like a little like guide to go through, would recommend for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the best for handovers, and then you can have a training session as well if needed to get like basic Excel or whatever tool skills up and running.
Yeah, and the more that stuff like you can record now and sort of like little videos and all that kind of stuff, it does get a bit easier. Doesn't always have to be like a mega Word document or something. And we find that sometimes something might break and even we don't know why, and the online forums like Microsoft forums in particular around Power BI are very helpful. Normally someone has had the same problem that you have, and people sort of share solutions and stuff like that. That can be quite a useful avenue as well, but that's more like fixing something that you're not sure what's going wrong.
Yeah, that's sounds really good. Does anyone else have any other thoughts?
Just tying together what Laura's just said with one of the earlier problems, that maybe it's a good idea if you're leaving a product behind and there's nobody supporting it, to just within the actual product itself embed the training materials, or even just links to things, links to a video that says this is how this works, and somebody actually showing you how to do it before they just leave you to it.
Yeah, making it accessible.
Finding things is often the hard part. Like, nobody, if you've not been involved, you've got no clue where to look for something, and that's if you know there even is something to look for. So just having everything really visual in front of you, and the product that you're in might be useful.
Yeah, I've had feedback before that if you make the handover document or the handover mechanism user-friendly as well, people are more willing to go back to it as well. So like if you're going to write a handover document, try to like make it to the point and very visual, or as Laura says, recording videos. People love that because it's just really easy to go through. Whereas opening
lots of little segments on things, even if it's like 5 little videos compared to like one big one, it's easier to find what I just need that bit because I've forgotten or something.
Yeah, that's really. Oh, yeah, we've had feedback before. I think we had a video handover for Ebola or something, and we had feedback months after that they kept rewatching the videos because it was just easier than reading a 300-page document, which no one wants to.
And another example from that is that several years back we were working on a program with the Health Advisor in International, and they essentially were working in a branch in the middle of nowhere, no internet, whatever. And in order to maintain it, they would be the sole maintainers. Whilst we made the product, they essentially worked together to essentially document. So the health advisor was in country with the Guinea person, and I mean, they essentially wrote down in French and English working together to like fully document how. And so yeah, like the fact that they made it themselves really helped with kind of their understanding and kind of the ability to maintain it. So we basically handed off everything. Yeah, I think, yeah, the ultimate user has to be involved.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. If they write their own handover, they'll know what they're doing.
And also less work for you, so it's a win-win.
Exactly.
I'm just like we all have challenges with our products, and your Venn diagram in the beginning, and then the kind of different tools that you listed out, and those are quite niche. Like user experience people know what those tools are, like the affinity diagram and the data flows and stuff like that. But it would be quite interesting, like the surgery version of this conversation, where we maybe take David's one or take one of ours and go, okay, so these are the challenges he's having. What would your diagram suggest to try and explore, like data flows or APIs or simplification or automation, or like that, some of the broader options that one doesn't have when you're just looking at a Kobo form in Excel or that would be really interesting, because those tools, when you listed them out like that, it was like, oh yeah, they all solve slightly different versions of the problem, and that would have been cool. Would be cool.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, if anyone would like to, we can have like another session. I just don't want to like spend too much time on it, because we only have 5 minutes left as well. But yeah, like there's a lot of these design tools. There's a book actually sitting around in the British Red Cross called 100 Tools for Design or something like that. And they're really good, actually. It documents like a lot of these design tools that help you capture the user needs better and help design the end products in different ways. And reading through it, it tells you which stage it's at as well in the design process. So if I go back to the presentation very briefly, so in this diagram here, there's a bunch of like smaller steps, the empathize, define, ideate, and that book goes through each of these steps and tells you, sorry, ooh, can't make this work, and gives you a bunch of tools with examples on each. So like with David, I don't know, I haven't talked to the users. I don't know what their use cases or what their limitations are or what they really want. But there's many things you could do. You could like test multiple versions. You could test multiple tools. And with the testing, obviously, you need to be careful that you're not breaking anything or you're not setting expectations in the wrong way. But yeah, and I don't know if other people do that, but in the field, I definitely test multiple tools. And then I explain to them that I'm just testing to, not set their expectation that we're going to use this forever. But I run it for a week, but also I try to make it seamless, because sometimes they just want something now quickly so that they can start collecting data. So then I roll something out. But for example, like an example that I gave Paul recently was I send out the link, but I'll use like tiny URL to send the link, and then I change the link behind it so then no one notices I've changed the form. And then that gives me the flexibility to change the tool behind the link as well. So it's the same tiny URL link. I'm not bothering any user, because they still have the same link and they can keep clicking on it, and it will still take them to whatever form I've decided to deploy. And I can change it from Kobo to Google Forms to whatever from all of my testing, but it's still the same link for them. It doesn't change their lives that much, as long as it's really obvious for them what they need to answer. And I can just change the whole technology behind it and they won't even notice. So that's one way of testing, for example, and like the testing process, like some things that you can think about. For ideation, there's lots of other interesting tools as well, but I'm aware we're running out of time. And if people are interested, we can talk into more details. Just let me know if this is actually interesting, because I don't want to bore people either. Or we can walk through like a specific project or something and like go through like a lot of examples or something like that, if that's of interest to people. Or we can talk through if someone has gone through like these processes before, we can like go through what they've done as well. I don't know what you guys think.
You mean for another meeting? Yeah.
Yeah, for another meeting. Well, the next week is geography, so that's for Paul and you.
Yeah.
Do you guys actually want to explain a little bit about the session next week before we end the session? And if anyone has any questions, we can do another design session at some point.
Maybe, Tuong, when you do the checkout round, maybe just asking people what they would find useful in future sessions.
Yeah, maybe we can. Yeah, okay. If Paul or Claire just wants to spend a minute saying, talking about next week, and then we'll do a checkout round.
Okay, so shall I start then? So I've tried to get a couple of different people from different directorates to talk about the kind of geographical or locational data that they collect, the sources of that data, if they use any like APIs or like postcode lookup tools, how they work with that data, if they've got any issues with it, and then ultimately where they report on it and at what level. So it's just very like, you know, basic talk about that. But I think Jackie's talking, or Dom, I'm not sure, Jackie, if it's your Dom, but somebody from UK Ops will be talking about their stuff. And then I've also drafted somebody in from fundraising to talk about what data they have. And then this isn't confirmed yet, but it's possible I'm going to get Anna Cooper from my team to talk about some, you know, just standardization that she's been working on, and data governance around that kind of thing, which I don't know anything about, but I've just been told that she has been doing something on it. So if she's got time and can come, we might add her in as well.
Yeah, I think the hope is that
The other part is Paul's part, I think, about the geoportal.
Yeah, so this is part of, I would say, like Ian's, director of, now he's the head of INDT, director of INDT.
CIO now.
Whatever he's doing. So as part of the data strategy for this year, it was the kind of the bringing together of like all the geographic kind of data sets into a single common place that then is kind of an authoritative, when I say like data portal for the organization. And so I'll just be kind of running through kind of what that kind of will look like in the future, hopefully. And then, yeah, just get feedback around like what layers should we be identifying as like the top priority, what layers are second, and kind of, yeah, like what do we need to bring all of this geographic data together so that we can actually visualize it, so and make it available for the organization. Yeah.
So basically, you guys are all the users. So if you pitch up and tell Paul what your challenges are, then hopefully they'll be captured.
I'll just run away very quickly.
Ahead, I've just realized we have another meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. I'll just do a quick checkout round. Jacqueline, is there any specific topic that comes to your mind that would be useful for you from the Information Management Hour? If you don't know, no worries.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Cool. Laura?
Yeah, this is only my second one, so not sure, but I found them really useful actually. And today's one has been useful, although I'm glad you're recording because I missed a bit of the presentation thanks to Toddler. So yeah, I guess just like it's interesting hearing like sort of different people coming together and the lens not being like, oh, sort of like the service, it's more that everyone's looking like sharing that data experience or like design experience or like that kind of process experience, rather than it being about, oh, independent living for us or something where you get a bit tunnel vision. So it's just good listening to what everyone else is up to. But yeah, the design stuff is always of interest because anything we can do to make design of our products better for people, we'd always be open to.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
I just have to run to another meeting as well, but I just thank you so much for, I guess, listening to the overseas branches experience today. It was interesting and good to get some input.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks
and then
so much.
see you in the next section then.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, bye.
Bye. Paul, anything you would find useful?
Well, this is my first session, so I think everyone's doing better than I am. I would say, you know what I would say? I honestly don't know. I'm sorry.
Worries. No worries. You can pitch up. You can say later, or you can send me a message as well.
Oh God.
Have your contact. Is he?
I mean, it would be great actually to. I mean, this is me being a bit selfish, I suppose. But as part of like the federation work that we do, we like run exercises where we essentially do like storyboarding, where we have like a problem and then like we go away as a group and kind of storyboard what we would think, rather than working on an actual like example, like in real life. So it would be quite interesting to like see, like, I mean, I suppose this is the point of this whole hour, to be fair, like the problem, and then like how different people outside of that service would then, outside that department would then kind of approach that problem.
Yeah. Do you want to facilitate one of these?
when I'm back in the team.
Yeah. No, it would be really good actually. Like to bring a problem and then like get a group of people to see how they would approach it from a different lens.
Yeah. That'd
Yeah,
be
sounds
quite
good.
cool to collect that, and then
I'll put it down on the list of ideas. Thanks. Izzy?
Yeah, I'd be up for more user design stuff, I think, because I am very good at forgetting about the user and just carrying on down a path I'm really enjoying doing the learning on, and then it turns out that the tool's no longer useful for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then just sort of listening to your guys' experience and advice on how you actually discover earlier on in the chain that you're going off down the wrong path, and you bring it back, and how you, the sort of checks you make to keep sort of things on track, still useful, and not just a new toy for yourself.
Yeah, that's good actually. Maybe we could have a session in the future with like some concrete examples or something.
Yeah.
Claire?
That's great, but thanks for all your lessons.
Thanks for joining. Claire, did you have anything that would be
Oh,
useful?
sorry, I thought you'd said my name. For me, the big thing has always been about, well, since joining the Red Cross, I've had massive issues with access to data. It's
Right.
it's a big problem, and it's probably partly because I'm not technically doing data analysis, and I'm in the central data team. I thought I would get to do that, but sadly not in this role. So it's always been an issue actually getting to see the data that we're supposed to be modelling for, and I think it's really crucial, but just doesn't seem to be something we get. And I don't know if we can maybe talk about how we can fix the issue of just understanding what data we have, like the visibility of data. I'm not even saying like actually getting access to seeing any of the actual data points in there. I'm just saying we have data on this kind of thing, and having a list somewhere of what that all is. And then the other thing that I think would be really interesting, especially because of this new, I'll get it wrong, but it's like DCSP thing or something, some kind of data platform. It'd be interesting to see things like that, and then the geoportal that we're talking about next week, and maybe trying to think how we can work towards having something where people can actually start to see what data is available. Even if they don't have access, they can see like names of tables and go, oh, we've got that kind of thing. And this is just based on from where I was before. It was so much easier to see, oh, we have data coming through from advertising. I don't do anything with it, but it's good to know that we have that. And if I ever do have a project that might factor into, I kind of know where to go for it. So I mean, this probably comes down to something we have an issue with in the central data team, which is who's really responsible for each data product.
Should we organize a session mapping the data in the British Red Cross? Not so ambitious, but at least a start
you
on
need
it.
like a month, won't you?
Yeah.
Maybe
1
start
hour.
with one.
I think we can start from there's a list that Thomas Yems put out. I saw a list somewhere.
Yeah. And the other
from that
point is his Entity Explorer thing. So, but
yeah,
probably better if Tom Legg shows that actually. Or
yeah, so we could organize a session with Tom Legg about the entity. Yeah, we can move it one day just so he can join, I guess, because it sounds like a useful session actually. And then we could present the document that Tom Jens made and start a discussion, and then it can be like a bit like the geography one, like an introduction, and then we see what steps we can take from there.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's like, first of all, you need to know what kind of data you have that you might want to get access to, and then there should be something where we understand the process of getting access to that, because it took me months to really get to the bottom of how do you go about asking for access to something.
Yeah, it's not clear who owns which data, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not clear at all and really to anybody, and I think part of it is that people don't want the responsibility of owning it. But then, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the issues are, but hopefully something that would bring some ideas forward.
I think it's more maybe accessing the platforms that they are sitting in as well, not necessarily
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I find crazy is that we have this Azure platform and yet we don't really have any visibility or access to it. You can set limits on it, so it's not like people have to run up massive bills on it.
Okay, let's try to organize a session. I might contact you guys to see if there's anyone specific that isn't in the list of invitees that I should invite.
Yeah.
And see. It will probably be in a few weeks' time, because if we need to get lots of people, it will take longer to organize. But that sounds like a useful session.
Yeah.
I'll put it on the chat, and then maybe we can discuss it so that it's more visible to other people.
And then people can just say what they want to prioritize.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Sounds good. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for the feedback as well. And hopefully see you in one of the next weeks. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.